Hey guys, Pete here. It's time to discuss episode 8 of Better Call Saul's final season. It was another doozy after the mid-season break, and I've invited some friends here to talk about it. We do have a first-time guest, and two of these people actually saw this early at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I thought that would be, they had a little extra time to process things, and I thought they might have some interesting insights as a result. And I'm definitely curious to hear what they have to say. I have a lot of thoughts about I have a lot of thoughts about this episode, but before we jump in, I do want to hear what my guests are thinking about it overall, their impression of the episode, and also give them a chance to introduce themselves. And then we'll come back around to me and I'll, add what I think, and then we'll go through the entire episode and answer your questions. So let's start off with Gil. Why don't you introduce yourself? And you are one of the people who saw it at Tribeca. So how do you feel about this episode now that you've had some time to let it settle in?
Awesome. Thanks, Pete, for having me on. And quick introduction. I'm Gil. This is my brother, Adam. So if you're familiar with Saulcast, we're the two, I'd say, primary voices of Saulcast. Some of our OGs. That's right. Yeah. Some of our other brothers are kind of a rotating cast of characters on the show. So overall, I thought it was another great episode of Better Call Saul. I think anyone who was unhappy with the pacing of episodes 4 through 6 probably were pretty happy with the pacing of episode 7, and I think that likely continued into episode 8. I remember watching it at Tribeca, and first off, it was just awesome to watch this in a theater with an audience. There were a few laugh out loud moments, which is odd to say in such a dark episode. And on top of that, it was very intense, especially the first, 10 to 15 minutes when one of our favorite character, our favorite non-Breaking Bad character whose fate is unknown, when Kim is in the crosshairs again. It's a very uncomfortable and intense situation. I remember in the theater thinking that once that sort of got resolved and she was safe and it became more about Gus versus Lalo, to me, it was a different feeling because I felt inevitability there, especially people like us who spend 10 hours a week analyzing and talking about this show. It's impossible to forget Gus's gun down in the lab. And we, of course, know it was almost funny to hear the line where Gus says, "You can't kill me." And then I fill in the blank because I'm in Breaking Bad. We know Lalo's not walking out of there. It's very unlikely Lalo's going to walk out of the lab at that point. So I no longer felt tension. I did feel uncomfortable because we're in this dark underground place. We're dealing with life and death. So it was a different sort of intensity. And then coming out of that, I felt sad, especially for Howard and for how that's going to affect Jimmy and Kim. I mean, the tragedy of that opening scene at the beach. And I felt excitement because we've now closed the chapter on two of the main conflicts of season 6, Howard and Lalo. What's going to happen with these two characters? And they're both literally buried in the same grave, something I don't think any of us saw coming. And now it feels like we're in the end game. It's a total open book to me what happens in the next 5 episodes. We're rapidly approaching Breaking Bad, Gene, and I'm uncomfortable, I'm scared, and I'm excited.
Yeah, I can echo a lot of the things that you're saying there, and I'll give everyone else a chance to introduce themselves. But yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway was that the inevitability of it, it diminished my experience the first watch, but at the same time, I really like the way they handled it. And so we'll get into that when we get into the recap. But I just wanted to point out that I had that sort of a really similar reaction to the episode overall. Adam, you wanna add something there?
Yeah, I mean, Gil covered a lot of this really well, which is just the sheer awesomeness of everything that occurred in the plot, and so I echo all of that. And I just want to build on it and say the fact that there's still 5 episodes left, and we've already resolved so many questions, so many characters have met their fates. It makes me feel like the next 5 episodes, it's almost like a clean slate that they're starting with, and it's kind of a new form of suspense. What's going to happen with Gene? How do we fit everything in with the Breaking Bad timeline? So that's one side of things. And the other thing I want to say is just the actual construction of the episode, like what it was made up of in terms of cinematography, music, acting. This was some of the highest quality television we've ever seen. And I just think it needs to be praised, even just for something as in a sense surface level as that totally removed from the plot and everything like that. It was so carefully crafted. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And before we move on, I just want to, Big Ralph wanted to say yo to your one take bros. And
Good to see you, Big Ralph.
So I just wanted to get that out of the way. And we have a new guest, like I said. There were a lot of requests that we involve Courtney in the last couple of live streams we had, and we got to know each other a little bit in the mid-season break and had some conversation. So I thought we'd have her on. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about your channel and what you thought about this episode, which you also saw in the movie theater in New York City.
Yes, I did. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney. For those of you that don't know me, my channel is Courtney's Reviews. I am the new kid on the block. So thank you very much, Pete, for having me on. And I love talking about this show. So I only have talked about Better Call Saul, but I hope to do breakdowns of some other things once the series ends. So yeah, very similar to how Gil felt. Seeing it on the big screen was quite an experience. And people kept asking me, well, what did you think? What were your impressions? And I was hesitant to answer that because my experience was so colored by the thrill of being there. But having seen it again last night at home on my couch, it was every bit as good. And when you have Vince Gilligan directing and you have Gordon Smith writing, you know it's going to be an awesome episode. And it delivered. And for me, it was very much a payoff episode. It is a plot resolution episode, much like episode 7, where we see the resolution to the Jimmy and Kim scheme. I think this one was obviously the resolution to the Lalo storyline. So I have a lot more thoughts, but I'm going to hand it back to you, Pete, so we can get more into the nitty gritty. And yeah, hi everyone in the chat saying hi to me.
Yeah, I thought that, like, we talked a little bit off screen, and yeah, the inevitability of it is it's always a problem in a prequel, because like we had this twice now. We know in Nacho, whenever Nacho's taken out to the desert, we know what happens to everyone else besides him. So it's pretty obviously it's going to die. He's going to die. And it was the same with Lalo. I've been saying this since a few weeks now, that there was no way he was getting out alive. How can they make it really matter? How can they make it really a fantastic thing? And what I like about this is that it once you get past that, once you get past the inevitability of what's going on, it's really impressive. And Adam, you talked about this a little bit. It's really impressive just the way they used every tool in the box, to make this memorable and exciting, despite the fact that we know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? And there's not many shows I can think of that really go into that territory of where, it's like, hey, we know you're going to, we know that this is going to happen. We're not even going to try to, trick you about it. We're going to show you what it's going to happen, but we're going to make it, we're going to do that in a way that you're going to still, be completely excited. And it's awesome. You know what I mean? It turned out really well. And we'll get into the recap here. The only other thing I wanted to say, though, is that because of I think that and I talked to Courtney about this too, but I think that the fact that they had the 6-week break kind of gave us a little bit too much time to mourn Howard's death. You know what I mean? Like it was like, when you watch this episode, I was already kind of over the fact that he died. It wasn't still fresh in my mind. He almost was like furniture there in the living room.
Yeah.
The shock had worn off. You know what I mean?
Like
so I don't know if any. What's that?
Like
it was like a
beanbag.
beanbag chair, just floppy and.
Yeah. Did any of you guys pick up on that? Of it, you thought it might have been more effective if we saw it back to back, and like. It's kind of hard for you guys who saw it early to see. What about you, Adam? Did you think that would have been more effective if we saw it 1 week right after the other?
would it have been more effective? That's hard to say. I think it's kind of a personal thing. For me, every time I thought about the last episode before the break, the death kind of hit me again. Like every time I thought about it, I would kind of have a renewed sense of like pseudo grief, as much grief as you can have for a fictional character. So I'd say in my case personally, I don't think it mattered too much that there was a break, but I totally see where you're coming from. And I could see that happening for plenty of people where you kind of have had enough time to pass that it loses the impact when you finally return to the storyline.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, and we'll get to this, but it all rushed right back in whenever they threw him into the grave together.
Well, and even on that note, like to the point of how well crafted the episode was, they did such a good job on his corpse. Yeah, it would be hard to see that and not have the feelings rush back the way you're describing.
Yeah, and I was listening to the Insider podcast, and they were talking about. I was wondering, I was like, did they throw real people in there? And is that really Patrick Fabian that they tossed inside the hole? And it's actually stuntmen. They don't use like dummies or whatever, but they are acting as they're laying there. And it's pretty fascinating that he did a whole episode where he just played dead. All right, so we got one super chat here, and then we'll jump into the recap of the story. It's Big Ralph again. Thank you for the $5. He says, with an exclamation point, no clean slate. Kim will fall apart on Bad Choice Road. PTSD and murder investigation will do her in one way or another. And yeah, I understand the sentiment here, Ralph. We'll be definitely getting into this when we get to that part of the aftermath of her going to Gus's house, and we'll definitely address this. I'd say the main thing to respond to what you're saying here is that the main thing that jumped out to me was the way that what's going on with her is a mirror of what happened to Jimmy in after Chuck's death and after his trip to the desert. This episode was Kim's trip to the desert. It was her, not necessarily her Bad Choice Road, but her, what was the 508
Bagman
title? Bagman. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this is what that was my takeaway. The instant takeaway about it was, man, this was her her Bagman, where she went through the desert and she's going to come out a different person, just like Jimmy did. All right. So, the episode did pick up exactly where the last one left off, and we finally find out what Lalo's plan for being there is. And it initially to me, I was like, wait a minute, this is a little bit half cocked. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to send these two people that are absolutely freaked out to do this a really important job, after he's been so meticulous about the whole thing. And, it turns out that isn't the case, that this is all essentially a diversion so that he can get into the super lab. But I thought, what was, I think for me, the big point of this, like the big thing that happened in this exchange was that we see Jimmy make this decision to send Kim in his place. And initially, you look at that and you say, wait, what is happening here? Is he losing his mind? Is he being, is he cowering at this challenge? Is he really like trying to throw Kim out there? And, it becomes really clear throughout the episode that that's not what he's doing, that he's, he's just looking at his options and they all suck. And at least if he sends Kim out there, then she has a chance. She could just run away. He'd be fine with it. If, whoever stays in the apartment is toast. You know what I mean? Like, we've been talking about this. I've talked with all of you individually about this on the way up. It's like, there's no scenario that makes sense for him to leave these two people alive after they saw what happened. So they have to be valuable to him. And he kind of puts a clock on that when he tells them that they have to be back in an hour. Like, there's no way. I mean, we know he leaves, but from Jimmy's perspective, there's no way that he sits there and says, okay, well, if we do this right, he's going to let us go at the end. right? I mean, is everybody on the same page with
absolutely.
that?
Yeah, completely agree. There was no way that he was going to leave Kim in that apartment with the man that just shot Howard in the head. You know, there's just no way. And I think it was clear to me anyway, upon first viewing at Tribeca, what he was doing, trying to get her out of the apartment. And I think her hesitation and saying no is because she knew what he was doing, and she was afraid that whoever stayed would die. So I thought that was very clear. And of course, neither of them knew what Lalo's real objective was. He just shot Howard in the head, you know, so they're going to take him at his word. If he says, you have an hour to get this done, I think they're going to listen to what he has to say. So yeah, completely agree that was the goal was to get Kim out.
Yeah, it was funny. You know, Courtney, I think you'll remember at Tribeca, I think the theater burst out laughing.
Yes, we did.
And I think I was one of those people, but more because I knew that the line could be read as Jimmy's a coward and he's like, send her instead. But I think I knew, and it becomes very clear as the episode goes on,
Yeah,
that it was an act of love for Kim. He wants to protect her. He's sacrificing himself.
Yeah,
and Bob talked about that after. He's like, I'm trying to be a nice guy. And everyone's like, what an a-hole. He's trying to send her out.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I was just going to mention in the Q&A afterwards that Bob, you know, called us out for laughing at that moment. He's like, we were trying to be romantic. It's a sweet, sad scene where we think we're going to die and you guys are laughing. There were a few laugh out loud moments, though, that, you know, again, like thinking of the theater experience, I don't know about you guys, if you react differently in a theater, like if you laugh at moments you wouldn't necessarily laugh at if you're watching at home. I think that was a large part of it. You know?
It's definitely more heightened for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when I go to concerts, I'll shout and sing along and do all kinds of things that I don't do when I'm listening to the same music at home. So, I mean,
you don't normally mosh in your living room.
Yeah, I don't sit around and light my lighter and sit there and whatever is popular to do at a concert.
A lighter. Now it's the light on your cell phone.
Right.
Yeah, now it's the cell phone, huh? I'm showing my age there. We have a couple of super chats here, so let's get through these. But I will come back to what you guys were saying there about the Kim thing, because I think there's a lot more to get into there. Tony Carant, thank you for the $4.99. He says, anybody else not thrilled with the way Lalo went out? I guess it was supposed to mean that he got too cocky, but I think it was mostly luck for Gus. This is another thing that we'll talk about in more detail later. Right now, I'll just say that I thought that they set up a pretty good. I thought it played out in a pretty satisfying way, in that if you really think about what they're saying to each other and how they're jockeying for, you know, just sort of to kind of get that next shot in. And I think most of it actually makes sense when you really look at it. It's a little bit hard because, you know, you don't want the character to die, and he has been nearly superhuman in a lot of situations, but I don't think he does anything that is surprising there. He really does need to have this like this is like a huge earner for the cartel, you know what I mean? Like, Don Eladio doesn't care about their personal beef. What he cares about is money, and Gus makes a ton of that. So he has to have something that he can take back to him that is bulletproof. And I think that that's mostly what we saw him do there. Although he did get a little bit caught up in the personalities, because, you know, they have a pretty good rivalry going on there. Do any of you guys want to add anything extra to that now, or do you want to wait until we come back around to it?
I would just comment that I think Lalo's downfall was his hubris. So I think in this whole universe, every character has sort of their Achilles heel. With Walt, it was his ego, his pride, wanting to be the big man. With Gus, his downfall was because he had this thirst for revenge against the Salamancas. He wanted to get Hector. And I think with Lalo, it was hubris. It was this overconfidence and this over pride to the gentleman that just sent in the super chat. Was it Tony? Was that his name? Was I think hinting at. It was a sense of wanting to be able to prove something. What does it really matter that he proved that Gus had this lab? It was really more, I think, like an excuse for him to be able to kill him. And I think we'll talk about this more later. They did mention this on the Insider podcast as well, why he actually records Gus, lets him give his little spiel where he's talking directly to Don Eladio and everything. But I think it was just an excuse to get rid of Gus because they hate him.
Yeah.
That was the way I read it.
No, that is true. Like I said, there is an actual, personal rivalry. It's become personal. And Gus did try to kill him at the end of last season.
Yeah.
And like he brought up in this episode, he killed people that mattered to him, innocent people for that matter. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else they could have done that could have really been a better send off for him, other than staying true to the character that he was, and going down. He pretty much got everything he wanted. It just that it was followed up with him getting killed right afterwards. Right?
Yeah. I was bummed to see him go, because what a great villain, right? Like such a fun villain, but there was no way that both he and Gus could exist in this world. There's only room for one top dog at any given time if this universe has taught us anything. So there was no way he could get out of it. So
all right. GJ Nelson, thank you for the $9.99. There's no question there, but we do appreciate it.
His avatar it's a nice reminder that because I'm in the market for new glasses, so it's helpful.
It's useful. It's useful too. It has a purpose. Devonte Morick, $20. Thank you very much. That's very generous. Season 6 said Gus finds love. Peter Gould said that Gus was all about using others to save his own skin, till he saw Nacho the father, Mike's all selfless acts. He knew Lalo would have killed Mike, so he didn't tell him about the lab. It could have. What I'm interpreting this is that you think that he didn't tell Mike what was going on because he wanted to protect Mike. That wasn't my take about it. I did see an interview with Gordon Smith, and he was talking a little bit about his motivation in having that conversation. Like talking to Eladio, and we'll get into that later. But he did get that from Nacho, but I think he used it more of as a stalling technique. Like he realized that this was a way that he could hold Lalo's attention for a few minutes while he got ready to spring his plan into action. Did any of you guys pick up on what this commenter saying here? Did you think that there was a chance, Gil, that maybe he knew that he did this because he wanted to protect Mike? Or am I reading this wrong?
No, I think you're reading the comment correctly. And like you, that's not how I read the situation. I mean, it's the first time I'm hearing the idea, so I'd have to think about it and see how it fits. But that "it could have" line to me was said by Gus in such a stabbing way of, Mike, you really could have screwed this up. I didn't hear in that, sorrow. Like, it could have ended with you dying, and I did this for your protection. So I'll say that on first read, this doesn't ring true to me, but it's an interesting idea I'd have to think about.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I thought about that, as far as like, why didn't he tell him? I think part of that isn't so much about like the why, but it kind of goes to like the fact that Lalo actually did. I mean, Mike is his own kind of super powered, kind of guy. And he did get one-upped by Lalo all the way across the board here. None of what he tried to do to protect Gus actually worked. So I wonder if wasn't certain of a certain point where Gus said, you know what, I'm going to handle this myself because I want it done right, almost.
I have a different take on this scene. So I'm a little unclear if you mean like why he didn't like tell Mike when he hid the gun in the excavator, or why he didn't tell him that he was going to the lab when he went to the lab in the most recent episode. Because I don't think he realized what Lalo was up to until he was talking to Kim on the phone, and Kim is telling him.
That's true for sure.
Yeah, and then Kim tells him that originally it was supposed to be Jimmy that was sent, but then he was trying to save her, so she went instead. And she explains that Jimmy talked Lalo out of sending Jimmy, and he was like, "Huh?" And I think a bunch of people in the theater laughed when they heard that, because they were like Gus was impressed with Jimmy's powers of persuasion. I don't think that's what it was. I think that was a look of epiphany. That was realization. He realized that it was just a ploy to
Yes.
flush him out and be able to get into the laundry. So I think it was like he was thinking on his feet and went to the laundry at that moment. There wasn't really time to do anything else.
Yeah, I kind of agree, because I think they definitely set that up for him, you know, with him hearing curly fries or whatever before, you know,
Spice Girls.
and Spice Curls and those other kind of little revelations he's had during the season. I think they totally set that up there for, you know, us to see, like, okay, well, that's where the light bulb comes on.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that, you know, as far as what the commenter was asking, I just thought that things were left in a kind of weird place between Gus and Mike because of the situation. You know, they're not. We can see that they're not really like on the same page, but I don't know if there's anything more to it yet. We'll have to see how it develops from there. 8HNIC8. Thank you for the $4.99. Mike has now failed on so many levels the past couple of episodes. How will he redeem himself and surpass Tyrus with the threat of Lalo now gone? That's a good question, and one I'm not sure that we're going to get an answer. This really reminds me of when we got to the end of the Nacho episode, and people were saying, "What are we going to find out about this?" Or "What are we going to find out?" I mean, I kind of feel like the Mike and Gus part of the story is now concluded. You know, like maybe they will intersect. The stories will intersect in a way, you know, like if they serve what's going on with Jimmy and Kim, but I don't expect a whole lot more backstory on these two. I feel like Lalo was the conclusion.
Well,
What do you guys
I have a kind of a question about this. So if we look forward at Breaking Bad, how high up do we think Mike was in terms of the henchman hierarchy? You know, did he ever really climb that much higher than this point, or maybe these things actually lead to him being less promotable? I kind of have to think back because it's kind of hard to say how much of a right-hand man was he versus someone a little bit lower.
My impression was that he was above Tyrus in the hierarchy and during Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I understand kind of where the poster is coming from, you know, asking about that. But maybe it's not as clear as I thought it was when I watched the series, you know what I mean? But I think that he's definitely his most important person at that point.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure that I would agree that Mike has failed. How did he fail in this most recent episode? I mean, apart from like he pulled his guys off of the apartment, right, to put them on the laundry and on Gus, and then but as we were just saying, he had no idea that Gus was going to the laundry. So how could he protect him? I think that he demonstrates his usefulness as a cleaner, right? And like he's resourceful in that way, and like plotting out like what was going to happen with Howard and the car and all of that, and having done all this like intel on Kim and Jimmy and collecting all that evidence, right? I think he's very useful in problem solving to Gus in that way.
Yeah, Courtney, I want to second that. That's exactly what I was just thinking, is that Mike lost a chess match against Lalo, the way I read it.
Exactly. I was about to use a chess analogy.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, I think Gus is learning where Mike is useful, like you said. He's not going to be the person who formulates a strategy and outmatches a Lalo and realizes, oh, Lalo's heading to the lab. You know, like Gus had that hunch earlier and set up the gun there. So I think this is more about Gus getting to know Mike. How does he end up above Tyrus in the hierarchy? I think to your point, we see he is very good at a few specific things. And so Gus sets him up for that.
He can competently execute real life plans. But when it comes to the high scale strategy, like that's more difficult for him, especially when he's given incomplete information. And that is Gus's fault.
Yeah. There are a few people that can match Lalo and Gus and Walt, right? Like they're in a different league.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I understand where the person who asked the question is coming from, but I think you guys are right. I don't think that their relationship has been damaged or that he sees Mike as a failure. I think that they were up against a really tough opponent there. Everybody respects that was the situation that was happening. And when I said that, Lalo one-upped him, I was thinking more on the personal level of Mike, you know what I mean? Being like, feeling like, he lost the match or whatever, you know what I mean? Mr. G, thank you for the $5. Saul introduces Walt to Gus in Breaking Bad, right? Do you think we'll see a Gus and Jimmy scene, or should we just assume that relationship develops off screen? I'll throw this out to the other people here, but my kind of rule of thumb, or like, my thinking internally on what they should show in the Breaking Bad timeline is a lot more about how these characters, like, I wanted to reveal things about Jimmy and Kim. I'm not so worried about filling in the blanks or augmenting the Breaking Bad experience. I think that will naturally happen if you're doing things that are, like if we're seeing other scenes from different perspectives. I want it to be for the purpose of having a better idea of how Jimmy became who he was and how the ending of the story will play out. And, what happened to Kim and why is she not there? Is she going to, is there a possibility for her to come back? That's where I want the Breaking Bad stuff to tie in. I don't really, it's sort of like the question of like, do we need to know about Gus's backstory? In a way, we saw that he can shoot a gun, that probably comes from that period of time in his life, like his, it fits in. It's just like I'm way more interested in the story of Jimmy and Kim than I am as far. I mean, Breaking Bad's already good as it is. I don't know that we need to add stuff just for the sake of doing it. What do you guys think?
I think I'd second everything you just said, Pete. And if I were to think about a Gus and Jimmy scene, and could it serve a purpose for the Jimmy character as an important milestone in his story, if you wanted to have a scene that establishes Jimmy is now Saul Goodman and he is firmly entrenched in this world, a brief scene of him meeting Gus and them looking at each other, not as equals, but looking at each other as two players in this game, that could be an important moment that says symbolically, he's here now. But I think there's a lot of ways you could say that. It doesn't necessarily have to be Jimmy meeting Gus. So I guess the answer is we might see it. And if we do, I hope it serves a thematic purpose and isn't just, look, these two characters are meeting. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would be surprised if we saw that, because I'm not sure at what point in Breaking Bad that Saul actually even becomes aware of Gus's real name. When he introduces them, it's through a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. And at one point, when Jesse's going to skip town, he asks him to put in a good word with Gus for old time's sake. So there's not a real relationship there. It's through these other parties. It's through Mike. It's through Jesse and Walt. So I would be surprised. I'm more interested in what's going to happen now with Kim, now that she's seen the inside of his house and heard his voice. What could happen there?
Yeah, we'll come back around to that for sure. CJ Graves, did you have anything on that, Adam? I didn't want to cut you off if you...
No, I second pretty much most of what you guys said.
Okay. CJ Graves, $5. Do you think, although we know it can't happen, that Lalo should have logically killed Jimmy instead of leaving him in the apartment? I don't know. I hadn't thought of that really. I guess he could have just killed him as soon as she went out.
Not sure what that would have done. Yeah.
I think he was actually really going to come back, because he did say he was going to come back and they were going to talk some more. So I think had he survived the lab, he definitely would have really come back for who knows what else that he would have done with them. But
and he does know Jimmy has information that he hasn't just had the chance to extract yet. So there's some incentive there. And also in general, Lalo is kind of he's such an interesting character, because he doesn't even care about tying up loose ends. He just kills when it's convenient or when he wants to prove a point. In that situation, what does killing Saul Goodman in that scenario really do for him? It almost feels like a coin flip. He could do it. He could not. He happened not to.
Yeah, Adam, that's a great point. I don't think he just kills without like indiscriminately. Like he lets Margareta live, he lets the dog live. He only kills when it really serves a purpose for him, I think.
Yeah, I think he has a very low threshold for what counts as serving that purpose. But
Yeah.
I agree it's usually some purpose, right?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of not killing him is that he would, make Kim an enemy. If she came back into the picture, there's a possibility that if he just kills Jimmy, then that could come back to him in that way. But it's pretty
Well, you're
vague.
basically making another version of Gus if you do that.
Yeah.
Another person hell bent on revenge.
Yeah. Craig Otto, thank you for the $5. For whatever reason, this is the first time I worried about Jimmy's goldfish.
Yeah, I worried about it too.
No, we don't know what the status of it is. It's not a character. We talk about all the characters who never showed up in Breaking Bad, and I believe that the goldfish is in that category.
We don't see a goldfish in the scene where they're kind of repossessing all the stuff, all the evidence or all the things that have value, in the opener for the season.
How long do goldfish even live? Does anyone know?
10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
Just Googled it.
Wow.
It depends on how good of a
Nice.
tank you store them in. Yeah. In the wild, they can live pretty long.
Nice.
Okay, so Sir Torchington, $4.99. I love how Lalo's death was literally the only time they have not subverted our expectations with how it went down. Thus subverting our expectations. Yeah, I think we touched on this a little bit already. There is it's kind of a flex whenever you're going to do, you can just say, look, this is exactly what you thought is going to happen, but it's still going to blow your mind, you know?
The big surprise, I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for me, the big surprise was the whole with Howard in it. I think I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, and it was just visually really kind of a powerful image, I think, and I think it left a strong impression on most viewers. And regarding whether or not they did something surprising, I would say, yeah, especially because we had so much time to predict during the break. This went down exactly how many people saw it. And I have some mixed feelings about that, but in the end, the purpose of telling this story is not to surprise us. It's to show us, in the end, this show is it's about Saul Goodman and it's about Kim Wexler. And the events of this episode are going to be absolutely crucial and pivotal to the character development of those people. And that's, I think, more important than, okay, we know Lalo probably has to die. Are we going to surprise people by the way it's done, or just play it out the way it logically would happen?
I think I saw somebody in the chat say they think a 6-week break would have worked better after this episode. And I know there were things behind the scenes that caused it to happen, so they didn't have a choice. But yeah, I actually do agree with that, just in terms of the viewing experience, because plan and execution was so shocking. And I feel like by the time we got to this episode, that shock had kind of worn off, and now we're ready for another shock. But instead, this felt like the inevitable conclusion after that event. And so I think it would have worked better as almost the epilogue immediately after that episode. And it wouldn't have
that's
felt,
what I was saying earlier.
Even like a 2-hour special event episode.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been amazing.
Oh.
Better, right? No time to process. You just go.
That would have been crazy.
That would have been quite a ride.
Quite a ride.
That would,
nice.
Exactly.
That would have been a memorable night of television right there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because it would be coming off the heels of everyone saying, "Oh, they're all this setup, what's wrong with the pacing of this season?"
It's so slow.
Everyone would have had
a 2-hour thrill ride.
People would have to be walking around with neck collars on after the fact from the whiplash. All right, Data Deficient, thank you for the $10. Love the shot with the camera on the chair. The same chair Kim used to block the door out of fear of Lalo a few episodes back. Ends up being the very thing that Lalo straps Jimmy down to. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I didn't make that connection. I did think that was cool that they seemed to like mount the camera on the chair whenever they moved it.
They're so good at doing that.
Yeah. That was pretty sweet. But yeah, I didn't think about the fact that it was that same chair that she put under the door handle. Let's see here. Robert Gay, thank you for the $4.99. Do you think Kim will wear the mask that all is well, or will she disregard Mike's orders? Jimmy becomes Saul, but will Kim turn herself in or run? Well, I don't think, it's kind of funny because I don't really know what Kim could turn herself in for, technically, at this point. I don't think that she couldn't take all of she couldn't take all of Howard's, like the actual murder and things, like she couldn't take responsibility with that without bringing a lot of other people in, and they would just eliminate her. You know what I mean? Like Gus or Mike or whoever would have to just take her out if that was the case. Yeah, I think the big question, and we will come to this because I think this is the thing that's on everyone's mind, but the big question is, how does she react to her PTSD?
Mm-hmm.
And and we've already seen a little bit of it, like whenever Chuck died, Jimmy just went catatonic in a way, like he didn't respond to it at all, and we saw that it had a real effect on her. So it will be different, and the question isn't so much of like what, but it's just sort of how could these two people stay together, and how is that going to really play out, considering we know that they're not really together in Breaking Bad, not physically together. So that's what's really is interesting me right now.
Yeah, I feel like the fact that she, when she was given the freedom to get in the car and go carry out the task that Lalo gave her, she chose to do it. Presumably because she thought this is the way I can save my husband. But I think an equally effective, if not more effective way would be to go immediately to the police. She didn't do that.
And she had opportunity. They roll up right next to her. So
yeah, exactly. They make and they do a good job of showing concrete, both ethical and practical choices that she faces. Which almost always present while she's in the car, which is kind of interesting. You talk about Bad Choice Road. I'm sure that was not lost on the writers, that parallel.
Bad choices on the road.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we can say for sure, but I think it's a pretty strong indicator that she's not turning herself in, and if anything, these events might strengthen her in a sense, in terms of the newly compartmentalized kind of version that she's becoming.
Well, it's interesting the word compartmentalize, because we've definitely seen Jimmy do that, like you mentioned, Pete, after Chuck dies, and he learns that he may have played a role in that. When he hears from Howard, it was the insurance premiums. At that moment, Jimmy goes from catatonic to feeding the goldfish, whistling, and just having a grand old time.
He's like making juice.
Yeah, exactly. So he shoves those things down. We see Kim compartmentalize as well, but for her, it's been less, I think, avoiding trauma and more, I can do this bad thing over here and I can come up with a way to justify it and then go back to following the rules over here. I'm not really sure how Kim will process playing a role in a tragedy. And I mean, that gets to the heart of the person's question. We have an idea how Jimmy's going to handle this. When Mike says, go to work, essentially be all smiles. In my mind, Jimmy does that tomorrow and then keeps doing it for years as Saul Goodman. I don't know what he was going to do. That's one of the exciting things that I'm looking forward to finding out.
Yeah, and real quick, Jeremy, thank you for the $1.99. What is left for the Mike and Gus storyline now? We kind of touched on this already. I mean, there's not much, I feel like they kind of wrapped it up here. But we'll talk about it a little bit more when we talk about Lalo's ending.
Yeah, I do have some thoughts on that, so I'm looking forward to getting to that part.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting past the third bullet point as well. Harrison, thank you for the $5. What do you think will happen to the tape? I see three options: destroy the tape to get rid of the evidence, keep the tape like a trophy, show Hector.
He threw it in the grave, right?
Yeah, I think they throw. That's just what I was going to say. I think that they showed Mike throwing the camera and tape into the grave, like individually, not just one or the other, or not just together. But I think if I recall correctly, he throws both of those things in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're buried at the bottom they're buried below the Super Lab to answer your question. Okay. Maud Mary, thank you for the $4.99. Nice to see you. I wonder why Gus went to the laundry. He was safe at home. Lalo would never figure out the secret entrance down to the basement. I think he wanted to bring it to an end. I mean, that's what I was thinking, that he's going to have to look over his shoulder for the rest of his life, and he wants to take Lalo off the board. I mean, his purpose is to eliminate all Salamancas. I mean, he's made that pretty clear, and Lalo is a particularly pesky one. So that's what I thought. Does anybody have any other ideas on that?
Well, I think there's even some symbolism. I don't think this is directly related, but it feels in the spirit of it, which is when we've seen a lot of Gus fiddling with his clothing this season, whether it's his ankle holster, adjusting his tie, or putting on a clip-on. This time we see him, they make the point of showing us he takes his tie off, right? We don't see that too often. I think he's, in a sense, he's sick of the constriction. He's like that's him saying, I've had enough of this. Like, I'm taking the tie off. It's time to get my hands dirty and put an end to this.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not one that I had considered. I was just caught up on the fact that he took off the tie and left the button buttoned up. Like,
I noticed that.
I've never seen anyone pull that move. It's like whenever I wore a tie, I would always do both of those things in concert because it felt so well. Taking the tie off doesn't really change much.
Yeah.
He may have been trying to hide the vest underneath.
Oh, true.
Yeah, I know. I agree that there's a lot of things. I'm just saying from like a reaction standpoint, it was just like, why leave the button? The button is the bad part. Okay, yeah. So Derek Roy, thank you for the Canadian $5. Chance that additional forensic of the lab explosion in Breaking Bad will have Howard Lalo dug up. And Gene is now really wanted for questioning in Howard's death. Well, I read an interview where the interviewer asked Gordon Smith, I think, about this, and he said that didn't really go through their mind. I don't know. Is that a spoiler to say that? Because I just did. So I don't know. I mean, that's as far as I thought about it. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
Well, I feel that was some really deep, thick concrete. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the standard protocol is in like criminal investigations. We need to talk. I guess if we were really curious, we could talk to someone who's more familiar with this. But after a fire like that and kind of an arson along with all the other things that happen, would it be normal to kind of analyze the concrete below it or not? I don't know. I have a feeling no, but what do I know?
Yeah, and that was my reaction too. But it does. I do wonder if that's the last time we hear the name Howard, or if there is some kind of reckoning coming in the Gene timeline. Could we see Jimmy do something to try and recover Howard's reputation? Could we remember that very heartbreaking phone call from Walt and Ozymandias, that episode? Do we see a phone call from Jimmy where he calls someone and he says, Howard was not a drug user. It was not a suicide. I do think about that.
That would be part of an interesting sort of redemption arc. I don't know if the show is setting up for that. So it'd be kind of, so far right now I feel unexpected, but I kind of like the idea.
I like the idea too. And of course, Jimmy has no idea he's there. But if, since they're doing the investigation right after the end of season 4 in Breaking Bad, so it's possible that they do unearth those bodies. And then maybe Gene sees that on the news, and then that's part of his motivation to come back and say, I know who that is, or, set the record straight. That would be really, really cool if they did that.
Yeah. What would be really kind of fitting for his character actually is, like, let's say he drops the Gene persona, he decides to cooperate and tell the truth for once and save Howard's reputation and also spill the beans on a lot of other things. I could see that as almost being another phase of Jimmy McGill's life where he's now, like the guy who Catch Me If You Can guy who eventually kind of told his story. Like, I could see a 70-year-old Jimmy McGill, after serving some time, doing interviews on like 60 Minutes and enjoying the spotlight, but also finally kind of living a more honest life. Maybe writing a book about himself, right?
We'll see. It'll be like Game of Thrones, where they write that big book, and they're like, it's called A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
The last episode, we'll see Jimmy pitching an idea for a series called
It's
Better Call
called
Saul.
Better Call Saul.
Abby Trace, thank you for the $20. Kim Wexler isn't in Breaking Bad because Obama nominated her to the Supreme Court.
It's not even a spoiler because it's so obvious.
Yeah, it's like what else can you say about the truth? You know what I mean? It's just an unalienable fact. Sean Perkins, thank you for the $5. What about the Walt Jesse cameo? We know from Breaking Bad that Walt hasn't seen Jesse since teaching him in class. Their cameos would have to be separate, right? No, this is something we've talked about quite a bit, and I think that the general consensus, at least for me and most of the people that we've talked about on, I've talked to on here, is that they're going to show up in the Breaking Bad timeline. They won't. I think that they'll probably be together, and I think that it will be in relation to something that tells us, like maybe there was something we didn't understand about what was going on with Saul at that time that'll give us more insight to how he might react to things. And yeah, I just think it sounds like they're going to be more involved than just one scene. Like it's going to be an actual, story, but I think it'll be in the Breaking Bad timeline, and I think it will be in service of the Jimmy and possibly the Kim story. And does anybody have anything they want to add to that?
Agree.
Yeah, I think it would be a real kind of shame if you're going to bring those two characters back. You kind of have to show them together, not in separate cameos. Otherwise, I mean, consider the backlash that happened when kind of Star Wars was revived, and you had an opportunity to have Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, and Harrison Ford on screen together, actually, doing the Star Wars thing, and they didn't do it. And I'm not even a huge Star Wars fan, but even I was disappointed. I don't think they want to make that mistake.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a moment that they can put together just when they show up. I don't know. I agree completely. Gregory Lucas, again, thank you for the $5. How could Gus's story be over? He's been going out of his way not to kill Lalo on U.S. soil because it triggers a war he isn't prepared for. Needs payoff, ? Well, no, because Lalo did that for him when he faked his own death. The only person that knows that Lalo's still alive is Hector. And he can't really reveal that, because he can't prove anything. He's in a wheelchair in a old folks home. You know what I mean? So yeah, part of the irony of this all is that Lalo did such a good job of putting his plan into action. He also screwed himself in the end, because no one's expecting that. No one realizes that he disappeared, All right, Mendoza's Coyote, thank you for the $4.99. Lalo was limited on time, so he had to leave Jimmy there. He wanted Jimmy to tell him what really happened in the desert with Mike. I suppose that's true. I just don't think that was the most important thing to him anymore. I mean, that was like, when I made a video about it and I really thought about it, that's what I thought he was going to do. But it turned out that he kind of already put that together off screen, that if he could get a diversion going at Gus's house, that would free up the people that were at the laundry so he could get inside there. Anybody want to add to that at all, or?
Agree. Yeah, it was just a diversion.
Yeah. Okay.
100%.
Aaron, thank you for the $5. This episode is the only time we've heard Kim called Mrs. Goodman, right? That was thought that was cool. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I thought that was funny too, and I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about that. If that was like sort of like a dig, or if it was, he was trying to be cute, or is just like he was calling her that because, she's Saul's wife.
He actually calls her that, excuse me, for the first time in Bagman when she goes to visit him in prison. And as he's putting it together that she's his wife, and he's like, and you came down here because you love him and you're scared. Yeah. And then at the end he says,
That's a
like,
great
well,
scene.
yeah, and he on the desk and says, it was nice meeting you, Mrs. Goodman. He never knew her real name. I don't think he ever knew her real name. Maybe he knew her name was Kim.
I do think he finds it funny that she's married to Jimmy. And so he gets a kick out of saying Mrs. Goodman.
Yeah, because he brings it up several times. Like, how did a guy like you get a woman like that? You know, he's like, he's not really like subtle about it at all.
I kind of have a deeper reading of it. I think Lalo really saw Kim. He was able to read her very, very well. And I think that moment that I'm talking about in Bagman, when she does go to visit him, she reveals a lot of herself to him, and he's got her pegged. So when they're debating about who's going to go to Gus's house in this episode, remember in Lalo's head, he really wants someone to actually go to the house, right? Because that's the whole point, is to raise the alarm for Gus. And he was sure that she was actually going to go through with it. Maybe more so than anyone else would have known. He knew she would actually do it for the same reason that she didn't go to the police when she was scared about Jimmy.
Yeah.
Like, she had the chutzpah to actually go down there and talk to him, and then speak truth to power to him when she dresses him down, you know, in Bad Choice Road. So I think he was definitely impressed with her, and he actually saw her maybe perhaps as like the brains behind the operation. So the Mrs. Goodman and the whole fashioning of the Saul Goodman persona is, I think, a fun little play and a fun little nod to that. It's really Kim driving a lot of that creation. At least that's my reading of it.
Yeah, and, you know, I saw a comment where someone was saying that Lalo knew that Kim would be, that they would send Kim, and I hadn't really thought that he would have thought of it that far through. But what you're saying there, Courtney, does ring true. He definitely did recognize all of those things. You know, he's good at reading people, and you know, she laid a lot out. She had to be vulnerable in that situation because of, you know, the real threat to Jimmy's life. And so, yeah, he could definitely have put those two things together there.
Yeah.
Just a lot of this conversation is making me think of a really interesting topic that I think a lot of credit to the writers of this show, which is the way they play with people's names and their identities, and the way different people refer to others by different aliases. You have Walter White, Mr. White, Heisenberg. You have Lalo, or he goes by Jorge de Guzman, right? Which also Guzman means good man. And you have Saul Goodman, you have Slippin' Jimmy, you have Kim, you have Giselle, Victor. It goes on, and you can keep going. And a lot of these names have extra meaning to them, and there's a lot of interesting things to read into which people will use which names to refer to other people. And I think that's just like a topic with endless depth to it. Maybe a future video essay or something right there. But,
yeah, for a show that's all about identity and people changing. And I think on this show, maybe even more than Breaking Bad, people putting on different faces. It, I think, definitely falls into that ballpark.
Like, I've never seen a show where characters have so many different aliases.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and I really like they had a little teaser that didn't really show anything that came out, you know, that where they showed Jimmy in the Saul timeline again recently. And I really liked how, I didn't do a video about that one, but I really liked how they had it opened up with like interior and exterior shots of the buildings, you know, like his you know, we saw his office from the outside first, and then you saw the inside, and then you saw Los Pollos from the outside and the inside. And I really like that little play there about, you know, they really, the idea of like who you are and how you present yourself and who you become in the situation. And, you know, there's so much of that idea of masks and, you know, who like identity basically, you know, and right now they're hitting up so much trauma that like they don't really even know who they are at points, which is a lot of fun. to try to sort through what's going on with them. Lots of coins. Thank you for the $4.99. Not sure if this has been brought up yet, but one of the writers said that Gus got the idea to monologue from Nacho's monologue before his death. Yeah, and I mentioned that earlier, and we'll talk about it again when we get there. But yeah, I saw that, and it, like I said, I thought it made a lot of sense. That he's looking. He needs something, and he saw that play out just not that long ago, in the timeline of things. So I thought that was a nice little nod to him, thinking on his feet. Almeida's Army, thank you for the £4.99. Great panel, like the Avengers of BCS YouTube assembling. I still want a flashback scene of all the Salamancas together: Cousins, Tuco, Hector, and Lalo. I mean, that would definitely be entertaining to see that. They kind of did that in the other series, but Lalo didn't exist, or he wasn't a fleshed out character at the time. It's sort of like that photo that they show of Tuco and the Cousins with a younger Hector all the time. It would be cool. I don't know if there's time, but I wouldn't be upset if they did that. Slant MHAL. These aren't letter combinations that are easily recognizable for me. Thank you for the $13.99 Canadian. Knowing that Lyle isn't in Breaking Bad, should we be worried for his safety, or will the pressure of opening and closing twos in a row simply be too much for him to handle? I think it's funny, like when I was watching this episode, I was like, oh, it's Lyle, like I was totally into it. And I thought it was just really a nice little palate cleansing scene in between, what happened in the two parts of the episode kind of thing. And I was just like, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, Lyle, he's such a cool character. I really enjoy him. And you don't realize it, but like, then I go and I look at the comments and they're all about Lyle. He's such a fan favorite, it's hilarious. And, there are, actions have consequences, and people like Lyle are caught up in it too. There's working, having to work those 2 long shifts, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, fun little of something that happened at Tribeca is when that scene came on, like the audience erupted in laughter. I think that was the hardest we laughed, was when Lyle is singing Los Pollos Hermanos to the La Cucaracha song tune, which I think is also significant that he's singing.
La Cucaracha.
Yeah, it's La Cucaracha. So
yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
I doubt it's a real song. Like that's really their jingle. I mean, but maybe. So I just think it's interesting, the cockroach again, if it means anything.
Yeah, that's come up a lot in our conversations about this season, where Lalo, just for those who like Courtney, I think that's a great connection. And for those who are needed their memory jog, that's when Kim is worried about Saul, and she's confronting Lalo in the prison, and Lalo's like, oh, he'll be fine. He's like La Cucaracha. Always gets away.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Roger Rubio, thank you for the $5. Just wanted to say thank you for all the great breakdowns you all provide to us. Yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for watching. We wouldn't probably be making them if you weren't. So thanks a lot for that. Tin Omen, yes, $6. Thank you. Thoughts on how Saul looked when he found out Mike knew about the plan against Howard? He looked at Kim a few times like, WTF. I thought this was interesting too, because that should have surprised Jimmy. I don't know if I picked up anything in his reaction, but I do wonder if that's planting a seed, for the future. Because he didn't know, she never told him that they were following them. Really, there's no reason for Mike to know all of what they're doing. Like nobody, like part of what he said to her on the bed at that one point is, nobody knows what we're doing except for us. That was part of the foundation of why their plan was going to work. And then he does just sort of find out that Mike knows.
And on top of that, he still doesn't know that Kim knew Lalo was alive.
Yeah.
That could be a potential nuclear bomb, kind of waiting to go off.
Yeah, and some of those looks could have been that question, because it always takes me on initial viewing, plan and execution took me a second to realize just how it's not, when Lalo shows up, it's not just shock Lalo's here, but he's seeing a ghost. In his mind, Lalo is dead, and
Yeah.
he might look at Kim and wonder, why are you not as shocked as I am? So there is a pretty big WTF there. And I do think that the seed was planted, that Kim knew about this. Mike went to her rather than him. That seed was planted, and I do think there's a payoff coming, a confrontation or a discussion between them.
Yeah, I just don't know that, Jimmy is going to be like, I can't see him like, I don't know. I can see him being hurt by it, but I can't really see it going much further than that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe it'll be like Mike being upset at Gus for not telling him about the laundry. Like, why didn't you mention it? I mean, this
Yeah.
is more significant though, so
Yeah, but I mean, nobody really thinks that Jimmy's going to leave Kim at this point. You know what I mean? Like over that, they after this episode, it really changed. And we haven't really been able to talk about it yet, but it really changed like everything this episode. Even though what happened wasn't directly related to them, the way that their relationship is what it depends on. There's a lot of questions as far as how that continues, and not because like you think one or the other would just be not into it anymore. I mean, they're obviously they reestablished just how into it they are in this episode. Antonio Maru, thank you for the $4.99. Mike did not mess up. He's trying to kill Lalo, protect Gus, protect Kim and Jimmy in the lab while everyone else is moving at different speeds. Yeah, I mean, that's what that's just sort of in agreement with what we were saying before. I just said, like, I thought that on a personal level, he doesn't like to, he doesn't like that he didn't come out on top and as far as like, being able to anticipate what he was going to do. 8HNIC8, again, thank you for the $1.99. Mike unfortunately failed to stop Howard's death. Yeah, but that's not really his job, to be fair.
I do think it's significant though, and we were talking a little bit about this earlier. Not so much for Gus. I mean, what does Gus really care about Howard? But I think when he's looking down at Howard in the grave at the end, there is a moment when you hear the violins or the cello, whatever it is, playing, and it's almost like this sad death knell for Howard. And I was telling Pete that I was wondering like what was going through Mike's mind at that time. Does he feel any amount of responsibility or remorse for what happened that he wasn't there to stop that from happening? So I think that might weigh on him.
When he says easy with Mike's body, he shows concern for it. I think Paul Hughes in the chat says Mike can't stand when civilians die. And I do think it cuts deep for him, especially in this case when, Kim said to him, why weren't you there? Why weren't you watching us? I certainly think he feels some guilt that if he were able to anticipate Lalo's actions, a civilian would still be alive.
Yeah. In the game versus not in the game.
Right.
Yeah, and it's sort of the slow motion erosion of that, you know what I mean? Because we know that in Breaking Bad that he pretty much gave up on it in a way. He might not like the idea of people getting caught up, but he's sort of been weathered in that regard compared to when we first meet him in BCS.
Right. And also I think he's reached a point, especially by the time he's in Breaking Bad, where he doesn't have much of a choice whether he works for Gus anymore or not. He's just in way too deep. And out of self-preservation, that sense of justice and in the game versus out of the game, it might be correct, but all it does is put him and his family in harm's way to even dwell on it anymore.
Yeah, and logically, you can see how you would always kind of end up, if you choose that life, you're going to end up doing things that you didn't sign up for. You're telling yourself you didn't sign up for, but you are actually signing up for because that's the way it works. Swamp Crawler LS1, thank you for the $5. Gus had dozens of hired men, so why didn't he have a shady doctor on his payroll that was closer to him, not 3 hours away in another country?
Yeah.
fair question. Not one that I have an answer to, but it's a fair question.
When I think of questions like this, the thing I tell myself is this is still an early look into like the development of Gus's independent empire. And these are growing pains. That's kind of what I tell myself.
Yeah.
And he's still learning. Like the Gus we met in Breaking Bad pretty much made very few mistakes, except when it came to playing chess with Walter. And I mean, Walter is a bona fide genius, if not more than that. So that's really him meeting his match. And then the only other mistake you can really think of is just the kind of similar to the mistake Lalo made, which is the hubris at the very end where you're letting your emotions get the better of you rather than just finishing the job, such as when Gus is kind of taunting Hector in his final moments.
Yeah. William Fleischner, thank you for the 199. Nathan M, thank you for the 199. Will Howard's wife now come to play with suspicion? I don't know. I mean, I heard people were saying that they thought that Carol Burnett might be Howard's mother, and that might come in a funeral situation. Maybe his wife would come back. I mean, they got a pretty substantial actor to play that role if they only were going to use her for that. But I mean, it was also a really effective use of the character. So I don't know that I need to see more of his wife, but it's possible. It seems like it would be wandering away from things, but we do have 5 episodes. I think at least one, probably 2 more could happen in the regular timeline that we're in right now. So I think that's kind of where we'll figure that out.
I have an idea about what's going to happen with Howard beyond this point, because whenever I'm trying to speculate what might happen next, what would be the point of showing these characters? Like, how would it serve the plot? And at this point, like they've really resolved the Howard storyline. Like they've now come with an explanation for his disappearance, his death. So I think if they bring on like a Carol Burnett as his mother, or if they show his wife Cheryl again, it would be only to have an effect on Jimmy or Kim. So like maybe like if it's at like a memorial and they see them mourning and then they feel bad about it, that would be, I think, the only reason to show how it's affecting those characters. And I think we're going to see how they're affected already just by the aftermath of it. So I'm not sure that they would bring those characters back.
Yeah, that's like I said, a lot of this stuff, it seems hard. I mean, I understand that there's some, there's a lot of stuff that they could do out there, at their disposal, but, I don't think there's that much that they have to do, like, I think that they, like you said, I think Howard is pretty wrapped up. You know what I mean? It's a tragic story. His legacy was something we'll talk about in a little bit here if we ever get to it. And I don't know how you make that better at this point.
Regarding Howard's story and kind of the lie that Jimmy and Kim had been selling, they were forced into a situation where they had to kind of carry that lie all the way through to the end and basically to make it real in the eyes of everyone. And, they didn't intend for it to end with a suicide, but if you were to take the lie that they were crafting, the way they were framing Howard for all these things, if you were to carry it through to the logical conclusion or the extreme conclusion, suicide is kind of where it ends. Similarly, the lie Lalo had constructed about faking his own death, so, you made the point earlier, he kind of did too good of a job, because similarly, like that thing he was kind of faking turned into reality. And I, maybe I'm reading too much into this show, but one thing I've learned is you kind of never can, because the writers are really smart. They thought about these things too, I think. And one theme behind the show is the way you act and the lies you tell gain momentum. And eventually you lose control of them. And I think, in a sense, these are just 2 more examples of that among many that we've seen in the BCS and Breaking Bad universe.
Yeah, Ori Rob, thank you for the Canadian $5. I'm not really sure. I've been looking at this and I'm having trouble understanding what it's asking. Walt went to the desert because Hank was barbecuing his money. Gus went to the laundry because Lalo was barbecuing his plan to make it on his own. I thought when I first read it, I thought make it his own. So it was kind of throwing me off.
What's throwing me off is what the use of the word barbecuing.
Right.
Yeah,
Which I think
it's a little unsettling that word in there. It throws me off a little bit. But I mean, so yeah, what are you saying here?
Well, I think in this context, barbecuing basically means interfering. He was Hank was interfering in Walt's attempt in his actual money that he has there, and in Gus's case, he's trying to make money, and Lalo's putting a stop to that. So both of them went out there for the purposes of rescuing their money from an outside force.
Okay. Coleco, thank you for the $9.99. Does anyone think Mike absolutely failed in his security approach? I don't mean to laugh at your question, but I just this is becoming a recurring one today. Lalo outsmarted him at every single aspect. Not sure why Gus would continue to trust someone with such poor judgment. And then it has a little smiley face at the end. Yeah, so when I was reading that, I was thinking, okay, well, we kind of went over this, and yeah, I like the little smiley face at the end to lighten the thought of that. There's really, Lalo, the moral of this, or the thing about this is that Lalo was a fine adversary against Gus, which is a pretty hard thing to come up with, because Gus is so good at what he does. So yeah. Diego Diaz, thank you for the $4.99. Do you think there will be parallels between Jesse's PTSD and Kim's PTSD? Just like Jesse after shooting Gale, Kim seemed lifeless at the end. I don't know if it'll be a 1-to-1, but I think there will be some similarities. She didn't have to kill anybody with her own hands, but she was certainly willing to do that if she had to. And I think that that's sort of like the unintended consequences and the way they affect things, the way that they affect things that you can't really forecast when you're planning. You can't really take them into account, and they really end up messing you up in the end.
My feeling about this is I don't think we're going to see much in terms of Kim having. She was in immediate shock, but once the dust is settled, I think we're going to see Kim double down on the life that she's leading toward, which means, like I said earlier, compartmentalization, and I think that's going to potentially create even a bigger rift between her and Saul.
Yeah, I mean, even I think one of the exciting. Well, for me, the exciting thing about this show is always this question in a more general sense. Just how are these characters going to handle this? What choices are they going to make? And that's one of the things I love about this season, is that some of the what you would normally call climaxes are happening episodes before the finale. So now we get to see the actual fallout. How are they going to handle this? And I don't really draw a 1-to-1 connection, Pete, like you said, between Jesse and Kim. Both of them have gone through traumatic experiences, but they're two very different characters. So yeah, there is a big question. How is Kim going to handle this? What is the choice she makes next?
I mean, she was like pretty actively choosing this life, and she had so many opportunities not to. Jesse felt much more like a victim.
Yeah, and Kim she's made of stern stuff. I mean, I think the big takeaway from this episode is she is totally ride or die. She was going to pull that trigger, and there was no question that she was going through with it. And I have some ideas about like how she might react going beyond this. It might be a little bit of a spoiler because it's based on one of the teasers, so I won't talk about it just yet, but there's some dialogue in the most recent teaser that reminds me very much of a very, very specific scene in Breaking Bad that I think gives a little context to it.
Yeah,
I'm curious to find out what that is next week.
Yeah. Like I said beforehand, if Gil and Adam, they'll they'll probably step out at a certain point, and then we can talk a little bit about that afterwards because I want to talk about that too.
Well, it's the spoil sports league.
Yeah.
You guys can have your fun.
Yeah, since the people with some kind of self-restraint who can wait for the whole week without trying to figure out what's going on with
It's not
whatever
easy.
Josh Willis says something that I've seen quite a few other
Yeah.
people on there saying, thank you for the $9.99. Have any of you guys wondered what they did with the bodies of Gus's men that Lalo killed? And my answer would be no. I didn't think about it more than like I figured they have a process for that, like for other, whenever there's gang stuff or cartel stuff or whatever, when people get killed, they have a process. And I just, I didn't really think about it. What about you guys?
I thought about it a little bit because I saw a question like, why didn't they get buried in the hole with Howard and Lalo? And the way I see it was they had to hide Howard and Lalo. They had to make sure those bodies were never found. And these were Gus's and moreover Mike's guys. So these are, I'm sure their families are going to be well compensated, maybe a private memorial service. I can't imagine that they would allow their men to be heaped into a hole in the bottom of a lab. So I imagine they'll have another way of disposing of the bodies.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think there's a lot less at stake in terms of completely hiding them forever the way it happened with Lalo and Howard. Also, there was a funny theory floating around in the chat in our live stream last night, which is maybe Pollos Hermanos is about to have a new mystery meat special.
Gus is not one to waste resources.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I do agree that, like the main takeaway I had, what I thought about that was the reason they're showing us burying them is because of the importance of making them disappear. Whereas the other guys, they'll figure it out because, they're professional. They do things professionally. So it's not like a loose end in my mind. Max Adamski says, thank you for the $2. Thanks. Pete, you are the spiciest pepper in my daily diet. All right. That's cool.
He's the Carolina Reaper of Better Call Saul.
I'm glad to be able to be that. Radio Chaos, thank you for the $10 Canadian. Do you think Mike holds Jimmy somewhat responsible for Howard's death, which leads to their more contentious relationship in Breaking Bad? I don't know if that's the main factor. I thought that there was a little undercurrent of like Mike being disgusted with them whenever he said that's the lie you were telling, right? But I don't think that I don't know. I didn't connect those dots right away from that.
I don't think Mike is like overtly or has very strong thoughts on it, but I do think if you were to ask him about it, he would say this is like, well, you could say it in a Mike voice, but Gil, these are like childish games that they're playing, and at such an irresponsible time to do it. And I think he knows that Howard doesn't deserve it. He probably, just because of his investigation work, he probably knows who Howard is to an extent, and also he might have known him on a minor personal level as the parking attendant. Howard may have shown the courthouse here and there. And I'm sure Howard always had the right number of stickers too. I bet they never argued over it.
Yeah. Justine Browning, thank you for the $5. Thinking back to Kim crying when she read Chuck's letter to Jimmy and him not showing any emotion, there may be a similar split reaction to Howard. Yeah, and this is something that I had mentioned, and I thought it was interesting what you said, Adam, about her doubling down. Mm-hmm. I do think that she doubles down on the relationship, but I'm not sure that it's as easy as it sounds. You know what I mean? I think that there's going to be I feel like she understood that there was something going on with Jimmy, that she felt like she wanted to help him through that situation with Chuck. I think the more that you see of this, it starts to look like, well, this person is just broken and maybe I can't do anything about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think she understands like that Jimmy, I think there will be different. I think there will be different reactions to answer what the question is saying. But then what I've been wondering about more is like, does she think that she has to get away from him because they're not able to function in that same way anymore? I don't know.
I think that's a huge, I think, and it's going to be tough to make a solid prediction on this because, interestingly enough, and I think a lot of shows can't pull this off, but this show managed to create something extremely suspenseful out of the relationship between these two characters. Like, for me, one of the biggest cliffhangers we have is what happens to their relationship.
Right.
And I don't even mean it in like kind of the dramatic romantic way. I mean it in terms of like, they're not just husband and wife, but they've been friends for a very long time and have so many shared experiences and have such a deep connection. I really have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, none of us do, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's been pretty foreshadowed that Jimmy's going to be the one, if they break up, to remove himself from the situation, trying out of fear for her, safety and wanting to protect her. I think that's been really well established, and certainly what just happened might be the clincher for him.
Is one nuanced, and when you were saying that she was kind of moving towards this life and there's potential for her to double down, I do think that there is some strong compartmentalization that gets broken down here a bit, where she, in her mind, I don't think was thinking cartel when they were going after Howard. And there definitely is a wall there where she knows that Jimmy's involved in that stuff, but she thought that they were going to bruise Howard, and that's that. This is a major unintended consequence. So I guess it just puts a big question mark on what's her reaction going to be. I don't know that it's going to be. I guess I don't know if it's going to be the kind of doubling down we've seen in the past, where she pulls these scams and then is so enticed by it she wants to do more. I just really don't know.
I think less that, less of a petty doubling down, more doubling down in terms of like she might get more serious about doing things like kind of in the criminal world. And I don't think that necessarily means she like becomes an executive at Madrigal, for example, but like that kind of thing is not out of the question.
Ostro 1980, thank you for the $2. He asks, would Kim be the top candidate to replace Hamlin? And I would say that that's a definitely a no. She doesn't work there anymore, and I think the main thing there, I think that they'll probably dissolve the firm. He was the last of the named partners in the HHM. So I think that everything that they've gone through, first with Chuck and then now with this situation, it would make more sense for them to dissolve the firm and whoever else is there, start up something different. There was something that I wanted to, let's see. One of the things about, what you were saying about Kim and her future, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how, like, I guess if they do go into that backlash around the Howard thing, like how people react to it. But I'm just not really convinced that they're going to do that. So we'll see. Susby Art, thank you for the $4.99. Will we see Tuco, Price, Gail, Kim's dad, Jeff, Nacho's papa, skateboard bros from the first episode? I would say no, yes, no.
I would.
Jeff is the only person on my list that I feel certain we're going to see.
As I'll say, I think this is probably the last question for me to Adam. This is going to be the one we go out on. And I think, Pete, we're starting to see that you maybe don't even need bullets because there are so many questions and so many things people are itching to talk about. That's what ends up using up all the time. But I agree with all of your answers, but I would just modify Gail to maybe.
I agree with that.
And Skateboard Bro is just a fun tidbit. If anyone listens to the Insider podcast or reads interviews with Tom Schnauz, they've already heard this. But when they brainstormed ideas for the Howard scheme, one of the ideas they had in the writer's room was to bring in the skateboard twins, and that maybe they would have one of them get hit by Howard's car, make him think he killed one of them.
Yeah.
I don't know how fully formed the idea was, but we almost saw them. And now that we didn't, I think we probably won't. Maybe in Slippin' Jimmy if they do a second season.
All right, so you guys are gonna tap out.
Yeah, I think we'll tap out here, but I'll be back next week. And thanks as always, Pete, for having us on.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah,
and Courtney,
yeah.
it was great being part of a conversation with you and getting to meet you.
Of course.
Likewise.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, and I agree that the time I don't make bullet points is going to be the time whenever we'll absolutely need them.
This will be crickets.
There's no question. But yeah, we've gotten less effective of getting through, and I mean, it was like I was explaining to Courtney earlier. I want to have a thing where I can have a conversation and bring people on. Talk to different people about this stuff that I'm so absorbed in all the time. And the other thing is I want to, have a place where people can interact with us. So, one side wins out. It's not really a loss, you know what I mean? But, that's the way that it played out. And I'm glad everybody's here and asking questions. And I'm glad you guys were here today. And Adam, if you're not able to make it back, Gus said, or Gil, I don't know why I always call you Gus, Gil. I'm looking at it on the screen right now.
It's
and
intimidating demeanor.
That's right.
Yeah. But if you aren't able to come, he said you might not be able to come back before the end of the season. So it's good to have one more.
I hope I will. I believe for the next couple of weeks that at least for the next 2 weeks, you'll probably see me. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Then if you want to plug anything, now's the chance. And Courtney, you're going to stay around for a little bit longer. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'll just say YouTube channel One Take. That's where you'll see all of our video essays and things like that. We also do fun stuff. We just did a live trivia night for Better Call Saul last night.
Yeah, it was like a pre-premiere watch party.
Yeah, exactly. So we try to have fun over there,
It's all
and
about
then
the cameo. I think this is something you would really genuinely. Fans of Better Call Saul will want to see this because it's almost like extra content.
No, yeah, it was pretty cool that we for the trivia night, I figured we need to have somebody to oversee the proceedings, make sure there are no shenanigans. So we got a district attorney in there, who you might know, Bill Oakley. We had the actor Peter. He was in character and he did some interstitials throughout the night. So that was a very cool.
Oh,
as
that's
a fan
awesome.
of the show, to get that was one of the coolest moments of my life.
Absolutely. I had no idea. I was busy all day yesterday making the video, so I didn't check that out, but that's cool as hell.
Yeah, that's awesome. Gonna have to check that out.
Cool. Thank you guys. And
thanks for having us.
yeah, thanks everyone in the chat. Look forward to talking to you all again soon.
All right.
All right.
See ya.
See ya.
Okay, Guten Tag. Thank you for the €199. In Breaking Bad Season 5, Episode 1, they find 2 bodies after the explosion. That doesn't sound correct to me.
Season 5, Episode 1. That's meaning at the nursing home at Casa Tranquila. Is that?
I
Is that
think
what you're referencing?
what I interpreted this is that they're saying that after Gus or after Walt and Jesse burn down the lab, they find 2 bodies.
Oh, because I that's right after the first episode, back after the 4 finale when they kill Gus in the nursing home, and there was 3 bodies recovered, right?
Oh yeah, well that would make sense. That I think that might be what they're confusing, because I don't think they ever mentioned them finding bodies at the lab. Almeida's Army, thank you for the £1.79. In my opinion, 609 will start with a something stupid montage. I think that's a very good guess. I think that I understand the where you're coming from with that. I think we're due for one, and this would be a good timing for it. Let's see. You want to add anything to that, Courtney?
Well, I just can't imagine that they would use the same song again because they've used something stupid previously. They don't typically reuse songs, do they?
No, I think what the question is asking or is saying is that they'll do a split screen where they show them both.
Okay,
you know what I
okay.
mean?
All right, yeah, gotcha. Like showing like how they're reacting to.
Yeah, like they did it, first whenever they in season 4 when they were sort of drifting apart, and they did it whenever they were in the, he was in the desert in beginning of 509. Daniel Ventura, thank you for the $4.99. How do you think they will make the transition into Breaking Bad universe time skip since we saw Saul in his mansion in the season 6 trailer? I think that they'll show. I think it'll be just flash forwards. I don't think they need to like give some detailed description of everything that's going on. It just needs to make sense that this is at a different time. And yeah, I do think that they'll end up showing him right before, because of that teaser where they show him in the mansion. But I'm not sure otherwise. They have a lot that they can work with there. Do you have a favorite pet theory, Courtney?
For this, one of the things I like is like that they would show something that happens in the Breaking Bad timeline, but from Jimmy's perspective. So I like the idea of maybe him like being out in the desert on his knees with the "It wasn't me, it was Ignacio" line. Maybe seeing something behind the scenes there a little bit. But I agree with you. I mean, we only have 5 episodes left, and we're still, I think, about 4 years before the Breaking Bad timeline officially begins. So they're going to have to start jumping forward. So I don't know. I don't really have any favorite pet theories on this one or how they're going to accomplish it.
Yeah, there's so many options. It's hard to really, it's hard to like nail one down. UD Reviews, thank you for the $4.99. Kim on the bed, hair down, pink clothes, head down listening to Mike, felt also like a little Kimmy finally getting in trouble. Yeah, I like that. It's there's still, I don't know, they had that flash forward. There's still potential that there'll be another flash forward where we get a little bit more about her background. But that's one of the questions I had after that is, is she learning that if she does things a certain way, she can get away with it? I mean, she also kind of resents her mother. So there's there's like that internal conflict of like, okay, this is good that I'm not getting in trouble. I'm still getting the thing that I want, but I kind of hate that it was my mom who made that happen by being, the way she is, kind of deal. And so, yeah, there's that resolution of like, well, maybe that's, sort of why she still wears those earrings, and, why she's drawn to Jimmy, and, why she's really turned on by the whole idea of running the scams.
Yeah, UD is great. I've collabed with UD in the past. That's an interesting take. So like the head down listening to Mike. So like she's finally getting the discipline that maybe she was craving from her mom. I didn't read it that way personally. I think she's like in such like existential shock about what just happened. And I agree with what we've been talking about though so far. It's really hard to predict how Kim is going to, what this is going to do to her.
Yeah, I think visually, I totally get what UD is saying here. Like they're, visually it's very reminiscent of what she looked like when she was waiting for them to come in that room. But I also see what you're saying about like she's kind of in a whole different place as far as where they're at. Thank you for that. Sachin Paul, thank you for the $4.99. At what point do all these callbacks to Breaking Bad become fan servicey, kind of becoming tired of everything being a nudge, nudge, wink, wink? I think they've been pretty tasteful. I think that, I don't know what would be the point. It hasn't reached it yet for me. How about you, Courtney?
Yeah, no, it doesn't feel fan service. Probably like the only moment that ever felt fan servicey to me was when they brought Hank and Gomi back and they have their little banter in the locker room before they go and talk to Crazy 8. But I didn't even really think of that as too fan servicey because it was furthering the plot of how, like, he becomes like an informant for them at that point. But that's the only time it ever felt remotely fan servicey to me.
Yeah, I thought that felt a little bit unnecessary, and also Tuco, in the very beginning. They ended up putting him into they ended up, making him a part of the story. But I think those are the two worst examples of when, but I'm willing to let it go. I mean, I was really excited to see Hank and Gomi come back, and I like you said, I think it did still serve its purpose. So you can't really, it wasn't just for that,
Yeah, some people in the comments were saying maybe it was the line, "It wasn't me, it was Ignacio," like how he started to say that. So maybe that was, some of those lines that we hear.
Aaron Stevens, thank you for the A$2.99. Was there significance to baking soda in the fridge? I don't know. I mean, in the States, people just put that in there all the time, as a way to, what is the purpose of that? To
absorb bad odors.
Yeah, odors and moisture maybe too, or I don't know. Is it just about the smells?
I think it's more about the smell.
Yeah.
It's like a neutralizer.
It's probably something that the company Arm & Hammer made up, is like, oh, you really need our product for this great thing that it does, so they could sell a lot more of it. But it worked, you know what I mean? Because I remember, every house that you go to, they have one of those in there. SHXRKIE12. Thank you for the $5. It kind of sucks to think about how Walt and Jesse cook over Lalo and Howard's bodies. That's intentional. That was definitely something that they wanted us to think about, and it does suck. I agree completely. And I thought it was a pretty good thing. It's funny because that theory was so people hated it. Everyone kept saying that he was gonna be buried in the South Wall, and like on Reddit, people were just like, this is the worst thing ever. It'll ruin the series if it happens. And it seemed like it worked pretty good to me,
Yeah, I agree.
And Derek Taylor, thank you for the $5. Do you think the bodies of Lalo and Howard will be found by the FBI? We touched on this already. I don't think so, but it's a possibility. Dracaris, bitch, thank you for the $4.99. It's disgusting. Howard is buried next to his murderer forever. They'll need to find their bodies without a tip-off. Mike knew, and he died in Breaking Bad season 5. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if it makes sense to bring that in, like we kind of talked about this earlier, if it makes sense to have them discovered, then I'm not against it. You know what I mean? But I don't think it needs to happen. It's that's Howard's story. It sucks. You know what I mean? Like it's tragic and it's sad, and it worked in that way. All right. Soft batch ! Thank you for the $5. Did you think for a second that the doc patching up Gus would be the vet? I did. I was looking at that whenever they pulled out, if it would be him, and it wasn't. What do you think, Courtney?
I didn't know.
Caldera.
I didn't think it would be Caldera patching up Gus, strictly because he said he was done with with that.
Yeah, he did say that, and that's why I thought it would be like, oh, that's interesting that they pulled him back in, but it didn't turn out to be that way. The one thing I wondered, because I know you said you were going to be going soon too. Were you ever, when you went to see it in Tribeca, were you ever in fear of Kim's life whenever she went to Gus's house?
I don't know that no, when I saw that Mike tackled her, no, I wasn't in fear of her for her then. It was up until that point I was afraid of what Lalo might do to her. And I was afraid that they might have, at one point I thought they might send Kim into the lab, not at this while watching this episode. I mean, this is like a stupid theory I had a long time ago, something I was speculating about. So no, actually, like I wasn't ever really afraid that this was going to be the end of Kim, because I was so certain it was going to be the end of Lalo.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get to talk to everyone about that. But I thought that maybe when they were writing the story that was part of, that was supposed to be part of the tension. Is Kim going to get out of this alive? But when I'm watching it, I never felt that way. Exactly what you said there. I was just like, okay, how are they going to kill Lalo? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How are they going to get out of this? Because the aftermath seems so important. You know what I mean? The aftermath of the two episodes that were happening in, one right after the other, that it just didn't occur to me that whenever she left the house that she might be in danger at all. And I do wonder if that was, part of their intention whenever they were writing things, that we were supposed to be like, oh my God, is Kim going to get killed whenever she goes over there?
Yeah. I mean,
Doggone. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's certainly reasonable to be worried about Kim, though, for sure. I mean, there was a lot of ways that could have gone wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it's part of the DNA of the show for sure, is please don't let anything happen to Kim. But in that particular, that's why I thought it was kind of interesting when I thought about it after the fact. I was like, I don't think that she, I thought it was crazy that Jimmy suggested that she go, but at the same time, I never really thought that it would come to anything. Doggone, thank you for the $9.99. Brilliant scene of throwing Lalo in the hole with no regard. With the Howard music comes on and Mike tells them, be careful, showing that Howard wasn't supposed to be there and evoking viewer emotions. I agree 100%. I thought that was a nice touch. I listened to the Insider podcast, and they said that they wrote that piece of music. It was actually for the teaser, and then they decided whenever they were putting the scene together that it would work there. But yeah, I thought it went really well, and I think overall, I thought that the sound in this, the sound in some of those music cues, they stood out to me more than, I mean, usually those are always there and they're always working really well, but I noticed them a lot more in this episode. Like to add to the tone when I was watching it.
Yeah, agreed. And I think I talked a little bit about this scene earlier, and how, and with how like it meant so much to Mike, I think, putting his body down in there and having that moment.
Mr. Z, thank you for the $5 Canadian. PG said that Peter Gould, I guess, said that in season 6, Mike goes as dark as is possible, and that Gus finds love. Have these hints come to fruition yet? If not, how will they? That's a question I've asked myself a lot. That Gus finds love one definitely stood out to me before the, he put these out right before the season started. And I don't know that I would relate anything that's happened to him finding love. What is your take on that, Courtney? Do you think that we've seen that yet?
No, and I mean, I think this is something like many people have wanted to know since we've seen Breaking Bad. We know that there are children at some point, unless he just has like kids' toys in his house as some sort of weird cover. It seems that he will have children at some point. With whom? That's a question. So I don't know. Maybe that's something that they will develop. I don't think there's been any potential.
I also wanted to ask you, Courtney, before you go, about this. It seems like this theory of Gus taking Kim in, like giving her a job, has gotten really popular of late, and I'm not a real big fan of that. But I mean, they did meet each other for the first time here in this episode. I don't know how you get from that to being like, hey, she would be a great asset to this corporation or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, and just to clarify, they don't actually really meet. She hears his voice on the phone, and he never identifies himself.
That's
so
true. Yeah.
She doesn't know who he is, he
meets the fake Gus briefly.
Yeah, the fake Gus. He wants to. I'm supposed to shoot you. That was funny. I don't know. I mean, I think it's possible that he might notice her. I mean, it's to her husband though that she's so loyal, so that's not going to really, I think, impress him necessarily. But I think it's an interesting thought. I'm not going to necessarily rule that out. I think there are a lot of different possibilities. It's not one that I personally subscribe to. I don't really see that happening, but you never know.
Yeah, I guess what I don't like about the theory is that it kind of requires them to both still be around but not together, and I don't really understand how that like how that all fits. Like unless Gus was like taking her as a type of hostage, like where he was putting her to work against her will, and then Jimmy has to continue doing what he's doing so that nothing bad happens to her. But that seems like really overly complicated and not terribly satisfying. As far as Mike goes, as dark as is possible, I don't know. I mean, he's gone to some places with Nacho, especially. I think like he beat him up before they took him out there. He served him up to, die. I mean, I think they could be referring to that, but I'm not sure. He was being purposeful. He was being vague on purpose and leaving things up to interpretation. I'm not sure that we've hit those marks yet. Alex, thanks for the $5. Do we think Kim will handle the PTSD? How do we think Kim will handle the PTSD now that she's had her desert moment? I'm sure it will be an issue, but hard to see her just running away. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really loved about this episode was that it made a lot of that stuff seem a lot harder. They threw in so hard for each other. It makes it a little bit more hard. It makes it a little harder to figure out how they slip away from each other now,
Yeah, and so I keep going back to Days of Wine and Roses and the significance of the song and of the film, and how Jack Lemmon leaves his wife in that film because she can't get better to protect her. And I don't think you can take anything one for one. I think it does give us some context and some way of understanding what's going to happen. And I can see how this would really this experience would move Jimmy to distance himself from her to try to protect her in that way. And as far as, is it okay if I talk about the teaser, or would you rather?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that now.
So the teaser.
Just real quick, if you don't want to know about teasers, this is your chance to check out, because we're going to talk about some speculation on what we saw in the last official teaser they put out.
Yeah, so at the end of last night's episode, it's the black and white teaser, and we hear Jimmy speaking, I'm assuming to Kim, where he says it gets easier with time. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Have you seen it, Pete?
Yeah, I saw it. Sorry, I was reading a comment.
Yeah, so
I was a little distracted.
He mentions that it gets easier with time, right? And,
right.
Kind of just like I think talking about like whatever trauma she's feeling or PTSD that she's feeling following the Howard situation. And what I was mentioning earlier, what it reminds me of is there's I think it's a season 5 episode 2 in Breaking Bad, Magical. It's right after the thing with Ted Beneke happens, and shortly after not Mike. I'm so tired. I'm like losing my words here. When Walt blows up the nursing home and Skylar finds out about it, she's like really horrified by the whole thing, right? And so she like falls into this funk, into this depression. She won't get out of bed. There's like 3 or 4 straight episodes where Skylar just stays in bed. And in that episode, Walt gets into bed with her and he's trying to talk to her like, you're going to get over it. It's going to get easier with time. And it's almost like verbatim, word for word, the same dialogue that we hear in this teaser. So I just thought that was really interesting. And
that is interesting. I hadn't thought about it, because what I thought of initially, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I'll let you go back. I just wanted to throw it in there that what I thought about initially was when he goes to Mike, when he's having a similar problem in BCS, and he says, when will this get better?
Yeah.
And so I thought he was sort of, I thought as far as what Jimmy's saying, he's echoing, he's parroting what Mike told him.
Yeah. And just like he parrots him with like the Bad Choice Road thing. So he borrows a lot of Mike's speeches. Which
is funny, because it hasn't worked for him yet. There hasn't even been enough time for it to work. He's just saying it to say it. You know what I mean? which is interesting. And then I do like what you're talking about here about bringing up, Walt and Skyler, because it was showing that they were different. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
Walt was able to look at this stuff as like necessary and look past the depravity involved, and his wife wasn't able to do that the same way.
Yeah. I mean, she eventually does come to terms with it. She does get over it, but I don't think you can say like that's a way to read what's going to, because Skylar and Kim are completely different characters, of course. But I think it's just interesting context and like how do characters react to these sorts of things in this world. So I don't know, but it may also be that like this isn't necessarily like Kim's first rodeo with something really traumatic happening. So I keep thinking of something that Peter Gould said during the Talking Saul episode after the right after the finale, the season mid-season finale, where he said he imagined that Kim like left her town of Red Cloud in like flames. So I don't know, that she might have like an interesting past where maybe something else traumatic has happened.
Yeah, I do think that's an important part of all of this, is that there's a reason why she ran.
Yeah.
There's what she told Rich Schweikart, which was that she wanted more and that she thought she was going to get stuck there. And there's probably some truth to that, because there's always, some truth that makes a good lie. But there could be something much more substantial that we haven't seen yet. I agree with that. And I'm very curious with that, because that would tell us a lot about what she might do in this situation, right?
Yeah.
Because, like you think Jimmy could push her away because he thinks it's better, like in the situation that you're talking about. She could leave him for that same reason, or she could, if this is a pattern that she's had in her life, and you kind of think of that thing of like, I'm going to fix it myself. I fix it myself, like that attitude she has earlier in the series. And you kind of can see that coming into play too, like where she's gonna say, I need to run because it's going to be better, for Jimmy, but that's just a way of coping with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So I can see her also wanting to fix things herself and saving herself. She even says at one point, I saved me. So I know Ariel Levine, who wrote the episode where we see Kim with her earrings. And she mentioned that they originally had a different cold open for that. And it was supposed to be like Kim leaving Red Cloud or getting to Albuquerque, like one of those two. So I think we might actually get that teaser elsewhere in the season, maybe like the next episode, for that reason that you were just saying, like to help give us context for how Kim might react to this situation. So if we see like what she was leaving and how she coped with maybe another difficult situation, that might give some context to how she would cope with this. Perhaps.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I saw that same one, but I did see something from Peter Gould where he said they had a different teaser and it really explained everything about who she was, and they thought it was too much. They were giving away too much information, so they scaled it back to the shoplifting scene instead. Matt Poliquin, thank you for the $1.99. Concerned about Jesse and Walt's age looks. No, that's not something that bothers me at all. I mean, we've been looking at Jonathan Banks as Mike for 6 seasons now, and it doesn't bother me really. I mean, I know he looks different. If I go back and watch Breaking Bad, there's a little bit of a wow. Okay, yeah, this was supposed to be later, and it doesn't match up. The continuity's not great, but it's not something that bothers me. They're good actors, and they're given good material to work with. It's a lot more important than if they have, like I remember people talking about the bald cap for El Camino, and it's like something like that just doesn't take me out of it.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not concerned about it at all. It takes a good degree of suspension of disbelief. I mean, it's it's been like 10-15 years, so of course they're all going to be older. And watching some of Breaking Bad over the weekend and looking at like Gus and Mike, and I'm like, wow, they were so much younger. But It doesn't really matter. All right, that's going to be the last one for me. I'm going to head out and get myself to bed. It's been a long day for me. But Pete, thank you so much for having me on. I had a blast, and thank you everyone watching for the questions and for having me on the channel. I really appreciate it.
We'll have you back. I mean, we have a few different people that we like to rotate in and out, and I'm glad that we had a conversation, off camera that I thought was, some stuff that we might talk about. Maybe we'll do a regular video instead of the stream, but we'll definitely have you back on the stream. It was great having you here. Glad you were able to do it. Definitely get yourself some rest now. It's late at night where you're at. And, I'll just for everyone else, I'm going to try to get through. I'll definitely get through all of these questions that are here, and I'll stay for as long as that takes. And, we'll all be back next week. So do you want to just plug your channel one more time or anything else before you go?
Yeah, sure. Courtney's reviews. I have not yet made my breakdown for this episode. I work full time, so it takes me a little bit longer to get those up. But yeah, come check me out if you like talking about Better Call Saul. I think you all do. And yeah, again, thanks for having me. Had a blast, and I'll see you in the cyberspace.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Thanks again. Have
Bye.
a good one. All right. So Arthur Miller, thank you for the $10. If you had to choose one Breaking Bad moment that is relevant for Saul's story and should appear again in BCS from Saul's perspective, what would it be? This is something that I go back and forth on. I can't really pin myself down on one. I mean, I think, like I said earlier, that what I would like for it to, I would just like, if they're going to do this Rashomon effect thing where we see something from a different perspective that changes, how we experience it, then I just really do want it to be through Saul's perspective. I'm holding out a little bit of hope that once Kim and Jimmy split up, that there'll be some chance at redemption, either individually or together, of them coming back together. So I'm hoping that, the way I look at it is right now, all evidence points to him being the Saul that he was, being the kind of slimy character, sleazy character he was, is a response to not being able to deal with all of what's happening to him in his life right now. Kim leaving or Kim being absent is something that would add to that. So I guess what I would like to see is something in the Breaking Bad timeline reframed so that we still see, is there some Jimmy McGill left in there? Because that would be in service of him coming back before the end of the series. Because when you watch Breaking Bad and you just think about what you see there, it's not 100% clear that there's any Jimmy McGill there. I mean, there's a few scenes that you see where he seems a little less Saul and maybe a little more like Jimmy, but it's an open question as far as I'm concerned. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Richard Calloway, thank you for the $5. Can you guys guess what might happen in the 4 years before the Breaking Bad timeline starts? It's 2004, that's definitely true. And Walt's 50th birthday is September 2008. I think that it's just obviously Kim is gone. Kim gets the relationship breaks down one way or the other. That could happen really quickly. We might not need to jump too far ahead for that to happen. And then he just settles into being Saul. By the time we meet him, he's been that way for a few years. So he basically has to live in that. That's all that I really see that is necessary. Kim has to leave his life so that he doesn't have that thing to hold on to anymore, that old part of himself. And from there, it's just a progression until he meets Walter White and gets in, to that situation. Big Ralph, thank you for the $10. Completely disagree that Kim will handle this better than Jimmy. Kim has never had to deal with one of her plans going south like Jimmy has. Go back and watch the scene with Kim and Jimmy on the bed. There's some, I mean, as far as we know, that she's never had to deal with that. We don't really know about her past, which is what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. There might be more there than what we know about. So I don't know if you could say that for sure. I think Jimmy has more experience and, but he also anything. He just sort of suppresses it. And that usually comes out in bad ways later whenever you do it like that. But we'll wait and see. I mean, I think it's a fantastic place to be at with these two characters. Ariozone, thank you for the $4.99. What do you think happens to HHM, and will resolving Sandpiper money be much of a plot point, getting lawyers like Cliff involved? I think HHM will be dissolved. They didn't really exist in Breaking Bad. We never heard about it, so I don't think they need to say much more about that. And I think the Sandpiper money will explain why he lives in that ridiculous mansion. So I do think they'll get that. I don't know if there's going to be any real, and I don't know if it's going to involve a lot of people getting, bringing back a lot of characters for like a whole another side story there. I feel like we know that it's going to happen, so they don't have to, but it'll depend on, really what's going on with Kim and Jimmy personally and what comes to them splitting apart. Michael Keith, thank you for the $5. Love me some peppers. Live stream question: do you subscribe to the Lyle is Heisenberg theory? I think Lyle. I don't think you should underestimate Lyle. That's what I think. That would be my answer to that question. The Ref, thank you for the $5. Prediction: Kim eventually goes to the police. Gus hears word of it and has his men capture her. Then Mike is the one who has to pull the trigger. I mean, maybe. I don't know if that solves their problem as cleanly as they would want it to. And I don't know that they really set up anything, other than their one meeting where he says she's made of sterner stuff, that it would really matter. It would be hard just because of the fact that she is a civilian, and it's the Howard thing is a pretty clear case of unintended consequences of the cartel swooping in and changing it up. Like I don't know. I don't know if that makes perfect sense. That I don't know if there's a lot of drama in that. Jeffrey Townend, thank you for the $10 Canadian. Kim becomes unnerved and therefore a problem for Mike. I bet him or Jimmy kill her. Again, I just don't think that that's a very satisfying ending. This story is not about, it's not about stuff that's problems for Gus or Mike. It's about Jimmy and Kim. So I hope they have something better and planned than that, but we'll wait and see. Sorry, I have to scroll here. Yeah. Formula 44448888. Thank you for the $4.99. Since Lalo is dead, who is the main villain going to be? It depends on which timeline we're talking about. I mean, I guess we already know Gus is the main villain in the Breaking Bad timeline, plus Walter White, of course. And in the Gene timeline, I think it's going to be Jeff. I guess they have confirmed that they recast the actor, but I expect that will be. And then after they tie that up, the question is whether Jimmy was going to turn himself in and if he's going to go back to Albuquerque, or what happens then. I don't think they need to. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they are going to bring Carol Burnett in. She could be she could definitely be a villain, but I don't know that they need to replace Lalo. I think it's one of the things we didn't really get to talk about, but I think that it's nice that they cleared that out, that they ended that part of the story so that they could open up and this could actually be different. I don't know that they need to interject another villain because these two people are already, they're already feeling the effects, and they'll be living in the aftermath of what's happened because of the choices that they made. All right. A lot of comments here. I'll try to get to what we have. Randy Wallen, thank you for the $5. Loose ends, will they be killed? PI who delivered photos, video crew. I don't think so. I mean, Howard is going to go down as, you know, I don't know. The PI is kind of interesting. The video crew, they can't do that. I mean, they're just too established, but I don't know. I mean, you bring up I guess what I'm thinking about is, from your question, is that it's interesting that Mike knows that all those people are involved, but yeah, I don't see them going in that direction. If they do something to the video crew, I'd be pretty bummed. The PI just isn't all that important, so we'll see. Rolo, thank you for the MX 100. The two bodies in the burnt lab in Breaking Bad season 5 were of the guy in the elevator and the one guarding Jesse. They couldn't ID them because the teeth do this popcorn thing. Oh, okay, yeah. Now that's starting to ring a bell. Yeah, either way, like I said, I read an interview yesterday where they said that they didn't think about the bodies being discovered after the fire. So I just kind of shut down my thoughts on that. But this is in relation to that other question. So yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that. Maximum Rock and Roll, thank you for the $5. Two of my favorite YouTubers collaborating. Keep up the good work to both of you. I believe that's in relation to Courtney, and yeah, it was nice to have her on. You guys were giving me problems about not knowing who she was in the last stream, and she reached out and we had a conversation, and I'll definitely continue to have them involved. The biggest problem I have with that is, I don't mind. I like talking about the show. I like talking about talking to more people about it. Those are all things I like. The problem I have is if we have too many of them, it's hard to at one time, you know what I mean? It's hard to have everybody be able to chime in. So that's really the big issue with that. I would love to talk to more people, and she's a great addition. And this comment agrees. Space Windu, $10. Thank you. Late to the show tonight. Glad you had Courtney on. Love your channels. Thank you. Whisper Gaming, thank you for the $4.99. A little late to the live. Any theories on who Jimmy's talking to on the phone when he says we're not friends? Oh, you're talking about the Bluetooth teaser. Yeah, and my thought on that was that he was talking to Jeff. Maybe after he paid him off, or scammed him in a way to make him think that he was paid off, and then he was trying to get him to go away. I haven't seen any other better theories about that. That seems to be the most make the most sense to me. Thank you for the $5 PMCC. Tony Corrant, thank you for the $1.99. I think we're not finding out about Kim until 6/13. Oh, so you think they'll put the last piece in the puzzle at the very end of the story? That's possible. It really depends on where she goes and how that plays out. It's hard to guess beyond that when they would introduce more teasers about her. PMCC, I guess, sorry if you did that by accident, but this one has a question. Does Gus have Mike plant a camera in Saul's office to keep an eye on him? As someone who's been a lawyer for the Salamancas, he's useful. Mm, I mean, maybe. I think that there's something to the idea that he allows Mike to do as much as he does with Saul because it's valuable to him to have a guy like him around. But I can't draw the conclusion that you're bringing up for sure based on anything that's coming to mind. I do think that part will be interesting to see a little bit more about. I mean, at times Courtney brought it up. At times he says, "Hey, I don't know who he is. I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy." And then other times he lets on that he knows more than what he said. So that's something they could do in that timeline to show what he really knows about what his connection to Gus's operation is at that point. Hat Matter, thank you for the $2. HHM goes to the soda guy from episode 7. Yeah, okay. That's a pretty good one. Why not? Dottie X, thank you for the $4.99. We need to remember this whole plan was Kim's idea. So how does it make sense for her to blame Jimmy for dragging her in? That might be a response to something else. I don't know if you're referring to something that we said. I don't think she would. I think she would take responsibility. I think she would definitely she's lucid, you know what I mean? She lives in reality. She knows what she did, and I think she's going to feel bad about it. The Ref, thank you for the $2. Kim disappears with the red van vacuum guy. What is she running from though? I mean, this is obviously a popular theory that's been out there forever, but after this last episode, what is she actually running from? It looks like they're gonna fix it up. That if they can just manage to go back to living their life like they were before, then this will not come back to haunt them. I think that's the most interesting part at the end of this episode is that they won't be able to do that. They'll be able to know that that's what they're supposed to do, but it's easier said than done. And I do think that is the end of the super chats. And if I missed any, I'm terribly sorry. Sometimes when it gets way out of hand, it's a little harder to track what the next one is when there's a lot of chat. But I'm going to call it a day since I'm in here by myself. I want to thank everyone who showed up, everyone that was a guest. It was good to have the conversation. There's a lot more about this episode that I wanted to talk about, so be on the lookout for some more videos because there was a couple of things that I really wanted to get to in our conversation that we got nowhere near because of the questions, which isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad problem to have, but there is a lot on my mind that I'd still like to get to. So maybe there'll be another live stream before the next episode. I'm not sure how that would work. I'm doing For All Mankind, which is another show that I love as well, and that's on Fridays. So my schedule's a little busier, but definitely more stuff to come. We got another question here. If you have them, post them now because I am going to shut this down in a second. So if you have a last minute question, you have about 5 minutes to get it up there because after that, I'm going to be gone. Mark Opie, thank you for the Canadian $5. Kim appeared with bars and shadows across their face. She'll end up in jail. Again, this is something that was a very reasonable theory to have. It's a little bit harder to imagine that at the end of this episode. For me anyways, it's more of a feeling, but she can't go to jail for Howard without everybody else being implicated at the same time in my mind. So maybe she does something else and gets arrested, but ever since Howard died, the whole idea of Kim going to jail theory lost some of its viability for me. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for coming out. Be on the lookout for more content about this episode. And like I said, maybe another stream. We'll see. They're not doing regular teasers, it doesn't seem like, with a lot of footage. So I'm trying to figure out what my second video this week will be. And maybe I'll do another stream. And that way we can get to some of the other people on and get to more of these questions and a little bit more about what we didn't get to in this conversation. So thanks for coming out. Please like the video. Please come back in the future. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.